So myth number 2 is that mixes will actually stimulate foraging behaviors in small pet. And obviously, as Dr. Iske alluded to, there's new products that are alluding to this foraging blend or foraging mix that are really relying heavily on this claim.
Yeah, and the truth is the foraging behavior in small mammals is extremely important. It's an instinctual behavior that they need to be able to express in your home as a pet. But unless it's done right, unless they're allowed to forage in the correct way, it's not going to have any benefit.
Yeah.
And these mixes, they actually don't stimulate foraging, but they encourage what's called selective feeding.
Yeah, and these animals are naturally hardwired to selectively feed as prey species in a wild environment. That's a great survival mechanism. But when we move them into captivity and we remove a lot of those environmental stresses, the predators and so on and so forth, that type of hardwired behavior, when linked to these types of muesli mixes, actually leads to negative nutritional intake because of these selective type products.
And the reason selective feeding, or concentrate selecting it's also called, is so hardwired in these species is because it is truly a survival mechanism. So prey species, especially small herbivores in the wild, can't store a lot of food in the stomach, and that is to keep them light and keep them fast in order to escape predators. So that's why they're really going to find the most calorically dense foods so they don't have to fill up their stomach and feel full while still meeting their nutrient and energy requirements. And we're going to dig into selective feeding just a bit more because it is so important and a core reason why these muesli mixes are so unhealthy for small mammals. So we've mentioned that it is an ingrained behavior in rabbits and small herbivores in general. And so this behavior is still going to be present in your pets just as it is a rabbit in the wild.
Yeah, and to Dr. Iske's point, rabbits have actually been shown to be the most selective of all of our exotic companion mammals, but this behavior actually applies to guinea pigs, chinchillas, and even into those omnivorous species like rats, mice, hamsters, and gerbils. Unfortunately, though, when they tie this behavior to these mixes, it oftentimes leads to them selectively feeding on the most calorically dense pieces, but a lot of times those nutritionals are also lower in fiber, higher in starch, and higher in sugars.
Yeah, and we'll show more about that in a little bit, but just to give you kind of an idea, in a mix, generally the foods that will be selected for first are things like dried fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, grains, and what's going to be left behind is the pelleted portion of a mix. And that's what's going to have a lot of the fiber and a lot of times all of the vitamins and minerals that your animal needs from this food.
Yeah, and unfortunately, as a pet owner, when you see that animal eating that food, you may not be able to recognize that they're truly selectively feeding for the parts they like. And either they knock the bowl over, or they tip the bowl, or mix it over, and then you end up refilling that bowl. So even though owners have a perception of that they're getting nutritionally everything that they want, that doesn't link to what actually happens in that cage. And some of the research that Dr. Iske has found has shown that upwards of 70% of rabbit owners will actually refill their pet's bowl, believing that the animal has ingested the majority of it when they've actually really just selectively fed the parts that they like.
Yep. And this is what directly leads to imbalanced nutrition through selectively feeding. And we'll talk a little bit more about the huge negative health impacts that this actually has to the pets.